We'll just give a minute for attendees to come in. Do you see? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we're good.
Good. Okay, I will then call to order the regular council meeting 1574 for Tuesday, February 7th. In honor of the Mi'kmaq rule, the Village of Pemberton acknowledges that we are meeting within the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. Here, for those members of public in attendance, please note that this meeting is a live webinar and is being recorded. A recording of the meeting will be available on the village's website following the meeting. Any amendments to the agenda? None, motion approved. Ms. Caddick, second by Councilor Helmer, and opposed. Motion carries. Adoption of minutes from regular council meeting 1517. Down to Tuesday, January 4th, moved by Ramsden, seconded by Councilor Nightingale. Any discussion? Opposed? Carries. Any business arising? Any business arising from the committee as a whole?
Am I good with that, Mike?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering if we heard back from MP Wheeler regarding my question about financing for living accommodations if we were to build a village office. He said he'd look into that fund, get back to us.
No.
Do you think we could follow up on that maybe in a week or so if we haven't heard? Thank you.
I have a meeting on February 17th.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
17th.
Yeah, he said he'd look into it for us. So thank you.
Okay. So that takes us to item number 7. Delegations. We have joining us today from BC Hydro regarding the Pemberton substation expansion presentation. Ms. Goodman. Morning.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me. And then online to be Jazz Gills. So she is our program manager for this project. Here. Okay, so we are here today to present to you and introduce you to the Pemberton Substation Rebuild Project. With me is Jazz Gills, the program manager for the project. So she's joining us virtually. Hello to Jazz. So we'll take you through the agenda today. So we'll go through the substation overview, the site, what will our key considerations for it, impacts and mitigation, First Nations consultation, our next step, and our communications for it afterwards. And so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jazz.
Thank you, Whitney. Thank you to the council for your time today. Can you hear me okay?
Again.
Yeah.
You're good.
Great. So I'll start with a brief background on the substation. So the substation came into service in the 1970s, and it serves about 3,600 customers in the Pemberton and Sea to Sky region. And it is supplied by one 230 kV transmission line from Bridge River. We're in the early planning stages of this project, and some of the key drivers for this work is to address equipment that is nearing end of life and also replace electrical equipment with PCBs to comply with federal regulations which are coming into effect in the coming years, and also to improve the station layout. You can see on this photo here, 2 circuit breakers are labeled, and those are 2 of the breakers that we'll be replacing in the first phase of the project, an example of some of the work that we will be doing. Also in this photo, you can see those wood poles, and they're looking fairly old as well, and we'll be addressing that. And this piece of work with circuit breakers will be part of our first phase of work to ensure that the substation is operating safely and reliably for our customers. On the next slide, you can see an overhead view of the station. So here we can also see the property lines for BC Hydro. And on the right side, you see this transmission right-of-way. And you can see some of the properties have expanded their backyards into the right-of-way. And there are safety concerns with limits of approach to live electrical equipment. So we're working with those property owners to address this. And this will also be in the first phase of our work. And the second phase of the work will be to expand the footprint of the substation to near where the property line is. Next slide. Rebuilding a station is a very complex process, and some of the key considerations that we have are to ensure a continued reliable supply of power while we rebuild. There's also environmental factors, safety requirements, engineering constraints, and costs. There's also the complexity for this particular project to keep major portions of the substation energized and continue to supply power to the whole community while we maintain worker safety. I do want to emphasize that we're still in the planning stages and things could change. Next slide. So during the substation expansion, we know that there will be impacts to the community, especially with the central location of the station, and we are looking to mitigate those impacts. As you saw on the previous slide, the station will be expanded and there will be some removal of vegetation around the substation and also removal of some of the parking stalls from the healthcare center, which are on BC Hydro property. So we are in contact with the affected residents and the Pemberton Health Center, and we're working with them working with them for those changes in vegetation in the parking stall. Next slide. So as I've mentioned, we are still in the planning stage and we've been undertaking several studies. We've completed the property survey. We've also completed the archaeological impacts assessment, and we shared this with the St'át'imc Government Services, Lillooet Tribal Service, and Lil'wat First Nation. We are still working on the geotechnical and soil studies, as well as the wildlife and vegetation studies. And as we learn more from these studies and as they impact the project plans, we'll keep you updated on those changes. Next slide. As I've mentioned, the project is broken down into two phases. The early works will be the circuit breaker replacement. And then when we move on to the next phase, the more substantial work of expanding the substation, we do realize that there will be impacts to traffic, and we're working to minimize those impacts, and also the overall impacts of construction work and impacts to vegetation. Next slide. We're also working to minimize the impacts of our planned outages where possible. So we're balancing the needs of the system with the safety of our crew and the larger requirements of the system over the province. So we have received feedback from the village, local businesses and residents, and we're incorporating that feedback where and when possible. So as we move further into the planning of this project and information around the dates and durations of these outages become available, we'll be communicating that to the village.
And then some of that feedback we have heard is that Sundays are preferred dates. So that's from my communication with Elizabeth, the village, and then as well as the Pemberton Chamber of Commerce, that weekends or Sundays. I know that overnight work is preferred, but that also we have to balance our risks for crews as well. So that's a big concern. So that is less likely. And then overall, just trying to minimize the number of outages because I know that they do have impacts. But if I would just say continue the feedback on, I'll continue chatting with the Chamber of Commerce as well to get their take on suitable times and try to work around that. So we can try to balance our needs and their needs, but overall, there will be some outages that will be required.
Do you have a sense of any sense of how many were, I'm not a specific number, but are we talking about a couple times, or are we talking about a number of times through the summer? And for context, the reason I ask is we're talking about Sundays, and I know you've been in contact with staff. There's only, I'll call them 10 really busy weekends in the summer for local businesses, tourism. Every weekend we have hundreds of people that come in for weddings. And so if all these people are flooding in and there's no power on Sundays, through the summer, I'm concerned.
We know that tourist season, so what I've heard back is around May long weekend through into September, about mid-September. And then also for us, winter work is difficult. So then it's balancing there. So that's part of what we'll look at when doing the outages. But Jazz, I'm not sure if you have more information. We're really in the early planning stages of even planning the outages or how many of them. I know that there's no outages for 2023. We're looking at an outage for 2024, but that's what I mean by early stages, is that we don't have a date, but we do know that the village does not want it during tourist season.
Okay, that's got it.
And thank you very much. I'm just wondering, over what period of time is this going to take?
The overall construction project or the outages?
The overall construction project.
So the substantial work would start in 2024, and the earliest in-service date we have right now is in the summer of 2027. And that's given our short construction windows due to, the winter season.
Oh, so that's almost 3 years.
Yeah, it is, but it is broken up into phases. So it's not like construction's going on for the full year, all of those years. So that is into phases. We can get into the construction if we haven't gone through it already, but we will have a construction management plan. We know that we'll be doing duck bank work along there. That will affect our traffic management plan. We are aware of the school that's in the area. It is the main intersection with the roundabout. So there will be a traffic management plan that we'll go through with you ahead of time. So we are aware of that. And we know that it has impacts, but it won't be the entire year, every year that we're doing it.
Thank you.
Okay, next slide.
First Nation engagement is ongoing with Lillooet Nation, and it's as directed through our protocol with Statlium Nation. And to date, it's included a project information fact sheet, engagement in early field work, and archaeological impact assessment. And going forward, we will continue with this engagement. And as site work progresses, we'll be working with Lillooet monitors on site for any ground disturbance, and also look at any potential procurement opportunities within the project. Next slide. So here is a high-level overview of the planning that we have in place right now. So as mentioned, work will start in the summer of 2023 within the property lines to replace those circuit breakers. And we're also completing the geotechnical and soil studies, as well as the substation design. And during this time, we'll also be looking at the removal of the vegetation, as I mentioned, and we'll be working with affected residents in the summer. Next slide.
And then for the communications, so we'll do it. We're looking at an open house in March. That'll include advertisements as well. Project one pagers, delegations to local governments. Many of you will be on the site tour for February 23rd. And then we also have the website as well for residents at bchydro.com/Pemberton. And then questions can also be sent to us at projects@bchydro.com. So if people do have questions, they can go there as well, and we'll update the site. And then we'll go to your questions.
Here.
Thank you. Just one question, and I'm sure you've got it already covered, but the residence is directly behind and the Lions Villa. Will they be directly invited to the open house? So there's.
Yeah, we'll be doing mail drops to them, and then also the open house, they will be invited, yes. And we will have someone from our properties team on hand as well.
And I see by your time frame, those people that are encroaching on the property, they will be affected this summer and have to make those moves.
Yeah, and we have started talking to them already, so that is part of it, and to give time for people to move things. I'm not sure if Jazz wants to add more from properties. I do know that for some of it in that area, just because we haven't used a lot of that area for a very long time, and it is a right of way, it's not necessarily that everyone along that right of way is necessarily everything's coming out. It's that for some of it, it's more of a cleanup in paperwork for that right of way. So the gardens, just making sure that any sheds fit clearance and that are safe. So a big part of it is safety. And then for the properties that are nearest there, those are the ones we'll have to directly work with, especially if it's coming onto the property line, because we will be using every inch of that property line for the expansion part of it. And then also the fence, because the fence has to be a certain ways, it's for safety. So it's to keep people away. So that's a big part of it. Jazz, is there anything else?
No, absolutely. We have already started conversations with those property owners that are immediately near the proposed expansion area. And again, as Whitney mentioned, the major concern is the structures and their proximity to the transmission overhead lines. And yeah, and just also, I had mentioned vegetation and vegetation removal. So we've also communicated with those property owners that some of the trees on their property, which are in very close proximity to the future fence line, will have to be removed for the safety of the substation.
And if I might, Mayor, whose cost will that be to remove the trees? Will that be the property owners? Obviously, they've planted them on your property.
No, it will be BC Hydro's.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Do you have an idea of what the project will look like in build out? I think, I have a number of questions and concerns, but primarily I wonder, as we're coming into town to see a fence around a substation and to, understand the impacts of what that might look like to the community. I think to have a really good, thorough, clean understanding of that and where we have influence in terms of putting vegetation back in, trees, et cetera. Like, what sort of communication will we have about that, and what kind of influence will we have with that?
I would say, go ahead, Jess.
Okay, we do have a vegetation plan where we would restore any vegetation with vegetation that, like for example, right now we have the cedar hedges along the outside of the fence along the road. So those type of trees don't pose as much of a threat to the substation because they don't grow that tall and there's no real risk of them falling over and damaging equipment. So there's certain types of vegetation that we are planning to reinstall to kind of take care of that visibility issue of the substation. And we will be getting more impact from the community, more input from the community on what they'd like to see.
I know that there's already been an ask for increased vegetation, and it'd be along the Pemberton Health Center area. So that part we'll have to take a look at. So that is considered extra because right now that's not what we have there, but we will take a look at that. That's part of getting the feedback from you. Then it's also talking to, that would technically be in the Pemberton Health Center. So it's working with them as well, because that would be along their property line. So that's where some of the mitigation issues, we're happy to look at it. But it might be a little more complex than just adding an extra greenery. But I'm talking to Elizabeth and to Tom Cisna yesterday. The feedback that we got was really helpful as we take it into that planning phase.
Okay. My general feedback would be as much vegetation as possible, please.
Yes.
If that's something that we have influence over.
Yeah, and that's we had a discussion about it yesterday as well, and I'd like to reinforce that as well. Any exposed fence all along there, and recognize and appreciate that it's complex, but really want to see maximum effort to screen whatever we can there. As Councillor Helmer says, that's flowing right into our town. It's a very exposed area, and there's a lot of folks walking through there. And consideration, as we discussed yesterday, consideration for wherever we can allow for maybe trail connection, or if people are going to naturally cut along that green space, that allowance is made for it somehow. But screening. Councillor Nagnion, did you have?
No, I just echo that completely. And also, I just had some concerns about the parking for the health center. It's already a very, very busy health center. And if we're going to reduce stalls, how are we going to? It's going to be an issue, I think.
We are
I
talking
think
with
it's
them
about-
at this point. Go ahead, Jess.
Yeah, we are speaking with the healthcare center on that, and I think it's only about 3 or 4 parking stalls, and where they store the garbage bin, which is within BC Hydro property line. So we are speaking with them on that.
Just on the healthcare center component, and I don't know what the impact is to them of a power outage, but do you understand it? I mean, I think from a community perspective, you know, getting access to healthcare and requiring that power all the time, 24/7 is really important. So how do the outages impact that?
I do know, so
delivery?
when we work on our planned outage notification, the first 2, so they'd be considered our key accounts as schools and hospitals. And so those are the 2 that we work with closely. And that's when it comes to priorities of dates and what works, school and hospitals are the 2. So they do let us know what works and what doesn't. So they're the first that are us when we start the consultation, the first that are notified. And they do let us know sometimes that certain dates won't work or not. So when they do give us a date that works, then that means it does work for them. But that's part of that coordination, is that it is hard to coordinate because you can't miss school time, and then you can't, and then the hospital needs to be okay with that date and generators and be able to work with that. So,
Yeah. Do they have a generator?
I'm not sure. I know that our key accounts, they work with them, but I
think it would be helpful for us to understand.
Yeah, sure.
You know, it's an unpredictable environment in the healthcare system. So, you know, to forecast when a day would work, you don't know what's coming in terms of healthcare needs.
Yeah.
Just one question, in terms of the priorities, I'm just also thinking about other emergency services, so like the fire hall. Would they also, are you communicating directly with them, or is that through the village? Because I would, you know, hospitals are, you know, obviously one of the key infrastructure, but also given how busy our fire hall is, and that's that key resource in the community.
My understanding is they're not part of that first one of schools and hospitals, but they would be notified if they're impacted. So anyone who's directly impacted, they get a mail out, so a postcard, an auto dialer, and then an email as well. And so those are the 3 ways that they'll be notified if they're directly impacted. I can ask if there's further notifications for them.
Right.
And my last question, I'm just thinking ahead 10 years, 20 years, like how this project, how does this, what's the long-term sort of impact of this project? Will this last for, this upgrade, is this going to last for 20 years, 30 years? Is it?
Well, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the substation has been there since the 1970s. And so this equipment has been there. Most of that equipment has been there since then as well too. Typically the equipment has very long lifespan, and the modifications that we make now will extend the life of the system. And so the layout changes we'll be making are in preparation for future upgrades to the station, which you know, our planning department looks at based on different factors, you know, growth in the community, usage in the community, and so we will just have the substation ready for future upgrades, whatever that upgrade may look like, equipment wise.
So yeah, I would say like what we're putting in there, at least 30 years, if not a bit more. But then it's what we're doing is, as you said, preparing for future upgrades, so that when we are coming in for those upgrades, and that's what our load forecasts are telling us that we need, then it's quick, it's a lot less disruption. So the thought was that if we're doing this now, to do the preparation work now, so then upgrades would have less impacts later.
Thank you.
You touched on it, and I appreciate that you know, you recognize it's right near the roundabout, one road in, one road out. my recommendation would be, in general, the more information you can provide our public with in terms of traffic disruptions, the better. So if they know that certain times a day, it's going to be really slow to get through there, they can avoid it. In general, my follow-up question was also going to be, when does a sign go up on the site to indicate the work that's coming, so that people could start to think about it and formulate questions prior to your public info. But yeah, in terms of the traffic, we talked about it. It backs up pretty far during school hours, especially if there happens to be train at the same time. My goodness, it's got the Squamish. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit tough to manage, and the more you can inform people, the better that will go. We did a complete overhaul of our downtown 4 or 5 years ago, and we had to manage the traffic in a similar way. And it'll be challenging at times. So,
What season did you do that work in?
we did it from April to October.
Okay. That's good to know. And the development sign is late spring, early summer, the latest it'll be up.
And also, just to add to that, when we do get it to that stage of work, the general contractor will prepare a traffic management plan and submit that to the city for review. And they will have their traffic monitors managing the traffic flow, as well as there will be early signage indicating details of traffic disruptions.
Any other questions? While we have you, do you want to touch on other power planned outages and why and how, and just give us a little background, because people are.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So planned outages. So this is a project planned outage, which is a lot different, which is why we can talk to you ahead of time. We don't have the dates, but it is easier to work ahead with the community and take in that feedback. It's the same as the maintenance project that was done. So that was the outage in September 10th. So that outage, we were able to delay for 1.5 years. I know that there'd been concerns about the community and during COVID and tourism during that summer. So we were able to delay that maintenance work for 1.5 years. But after a while, you can only delay maintenance work so long until it needs to be done. And so we were able to work with the village and the Chamber of Commerce and find that date, though I do know it still has impacts anytime we do an outage. This last outage that you had, so on Sunday, so that's more what's considered emergent work. So 2 poles needed to be replaced before they become a hazard. And so that's where there's a short time frame that work needs to be done. It wasn't a village-wide outage, but I do know it took out a key area of the village. And so I know that that's a concern. But the timing on those is a lot tighter to start managing. We were able to work with the chamber and with your CAO as well for the dates on that and move that to a Sunday. But I also know that there's others that express that they would prefer not Sundays. And so it's balancing. I know originally that was set for the Monday because it's a professional development day, but then we learned that the daycares for a lot of parents are in the school. And so it becomes maybe we're shutting down the school, but then parents don't have somewhere to send their kids. So that's also why it was moved to Sunday. I definitely encourage that anytime there's a planned outage, that there is that customer care line that's below. So if people are affected and they're getting that email to their inbox, to call that number. And if they have concerns, and it goes through our planned outage notification team. For this year, I'm not aware of any major outages, but I can follow up again just to make sure. I know for this particular project, there's no outages for 2023. There is a potential one for 2024.
And once this rebuild is done of the substation, will there be more redundancy in the system, we'll call it? And since I'm an electrical engineer degree, but redundancy in the system so that when work has to happen in the future, we won't have to shut down?
I know it makes the station more reliable, and I'm not sure if it solves altogether the outages. Jazz, if you wanted to go with that or answer more.
Right. Yes, it does increase the reliability and safety in the substation. The reliability issue doesn't get addressed. We will still have to have outages for maintenance going forward, but in you know, in future, I'm not sure what the upgrades, 10, 15 years down the road, it may include those. I'm not sure.
Any questions? Thank you to both of you for being here this morning. Much appreciated, and be in touch. Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Zach. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, we're on to 8.1, occupancy of the CAO 2022 fourth quarter operational priorities update. CAO Tracy.
So through the chair, I'd like to share with you some of the highlights. Obviously, there's a long list here of the activities that have occurred in the office of the CAO since last we shared an update with you, which was the third quarter. But one item that I want to flag from emergency management, of course, was the joint exercise that we did with the SLRD. You've heard a bit about that, and as well as received a presentation on that, but I can't say enough as to the positive impacts and learnings of that experience. Within communications and grants, I'd also like to highlight the coordinated joint federal and provincial media announcement for the zero emissions vehicle infrastructure. So communications and an excellent welcome for Patrick Weiler and the announcement of the grant that we received. Councillor Paddock was there to speak to that and receive that as well. Assistance within the realm of one of our biggest projects that we have going on here in the village, which is the official community plan. And the review and launch of communications with regard to that. Within human resources, as you can see, significant continued work on recruitment and onboarding. And in particular, the full complement of fire, which included the addition of the fire chief, the deputy chief, as well as our sorry, I'm losing my words here. Apologies. I'm not finding it here. The captain, thank you. That's Fraser. We also had the launch and the finalization of the fall staff survey, as well as the compensation study, which we have received some additional information about as well. In the office of the executive assistant, I just want to highlight the coordination of the 2-day planning exercise that we had in December. Those are the most significant bodies of work that took place over the last 3 months in the office of the CAO. And I'd like to make the recommendation that council receives the office of the CAO 2022 fourth quarter operational priorities report.
Thank you, Ms. Tracy. Any questions? Questions? Motion received. Helmer, second by Councilor Paddock. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're on at 8.1B, UBCMC EPF disaster risk reduction funding application. Stays. Morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning. The purpose of this report is to seek council support to submit an application on behalf of the Pemberton Valley Dyking District to UBCM's Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, in specific the Disaster Risk Reduction Climate Adaptation funding stream for the engineering of a pump station for the Arun Canal. So the Arun Canal is a mostly man-made drainage feature in the Pemberton Valley that drains the low-lying agricultural fields and the urban areas within the village of Pemberton, including the most populated and asset-dense areas. And during periods of heavy rain or high glacier melt, the Arun Canal is most subject to a backwatering effect from the Lillooet River, which creates an elevated flood risk within these agricultural and urban areas. In 2021, 4 new culverts were installed on the Arun Canal, and this new structure has significantly mitigated some risks However, the structure design meets a 50-year return period. And the rationale for the design to meet a 50-year return period was that in the event flows exceed that level, a backwatering effect would still occur and require pumping anyways. And although it was an acceptable design criteria, a 50-year return period flow on the Arn Canal is not only possible, but likely, and they were actually seen during the most recent atmospheric river event. Further to mitigating flood risk, the pump station would aid in post-flood recovery. Drainage capacity in the Pemberton Valley compromises flood recovery drastically. And during a large-scale flood event, drainage systems take a significant amount of time to drain water levels. The pump station would increase the drainage capacity, allowing water levels to reduce at a much quicker rate, and in turn allow recovery efforts to begin quicker and evacuated residents to return home much sooner. So the intent of the application is to seek funding to undertake the first step of this project, which includes an environmental assessment of the project, geotechnical engineering, a detailed design, and public outreach. Further components of the project and the construction of the pump station will require additional funding. But if successful in securing these initial funds, the village and the Dyking District will have in place a shelf-ready project, which can be put forward for future grant fundings. This project has also been identified through the Pemberton Valley Emergency Management Committee as a priority mitigation project for the Pemberton Valley. And the project results in positive impacts for both the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District Area C and Lillooet Nation. So the recommendation is that the Village of Pemberton application on behalf of the Pemberton Valley Dyking District to the UBCM's Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, Disaster Risk Reduction Climate Adaptation Funding Stream, up to an amount of $500,000 to fund the design of the Arn Canal Pump Station be supported.
Thank you. Any questions? Any questions? Would you like to make the motion for the application? Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Ramsden. For the discussion, opposed. Yes. All right, we're on 8.2A, Corporate Legislative Services, fourth quarter report. Mrs. Fraser.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for having me this morning. The fourth quarter report for Corporate and Legislative Services, which also includes the administrative component of the municipality as well, like the front office. We have a few highlights that I'd like to just touch on. Of course, we held the municipal election in October of 2022, and my team facilitated that whole project. And I wanted to acknowledge that Renee Saint-Aubin and Elena Arangaran did in stepping up and taking on the role of Deputy Chief Election Officer, having never run an election. They stepped up, and we're really appreciative of all the work that they did. We did expand our election offerings this year by offering a third advanced voting opportunity on a Saturday at the community center, which was really well attended and successful. So it will be our recommendations to move forward with that the next election, or if we're in a referendum situation of any form. We did also coordinate the election on behalf of Sea to Sky Community School District and number 48. They had an acclamation, so our work from that standpoint was not as extensive as it might have been if we had had a full election there. We do get cost recovery from them on the elements that we worked on. As you are aware, Gwendolyn Kennedy, who was our chief election officer, left the village at the end of September. And so as a result, I did take on the role of chief election officer and stepped in that capacity sort of late in the game, but we were in a really good situation. And we also offered for this first time mail ballots. And while we didn't have a huge uptake, we do have the process in place, the bylaws in place. And if we
in the next election. Now that people are aware that that opportunity is available, we may see more people utilize that service. Some other highlights I'd like to just flag as business licenses. We are responsible for business licenses. As you can see, the number of business licenses for 2022 has greatly exceeded what we completed in 2021. A lot of those business licenses are non-resident, which means if there's a contractor or somebody who's coming up out of the community, they are required to have a business license here. So we might be seeing that because of the construction that's been taking place, but also we've seen an uptake in a lot more home-based businesses as people are shifting from working outside of working for an organization and going independent and consulting and that kind of thing. So and then within that, the business licenses, we do have the short-term vacation rental business licenses. And I just wanted to flag that we have seen an adjustment. For a couple of years, we didn't see a lot of interest in having short-term vacation rental business license because of COVID and the safety concerns and all of the protocols that went along with it. A number of people chose not to operate during that time or didn't have an interest in exploring it. Since we have kind of are moving out of COVID, we are fielding a lot of requests for business licenses, and based on the cap that is set by council in terms of the number of short-term vacation rentals per neighborhood, we are maxed out in several neighborhoods, so we cannot accept any business license applications for those areas. But we do expect that we are going to start hearing from people who wish to have that explored further. Dog licenses, I want to flag this. It's always a little frustrating. We know we have more dogs than we have licenses out there. And certainly we are starting again, while we were receiving a number of dog complaints around off-leash dogs and activities and conflicts between dogs, when Lisa Regenwerter, our new bylaw enforcement officer, joined us and was out there in the community, we sort of seemed to see some stabilization in those complaints that have come in. I am unfortunately unhappy to report that we are starting to receive more complaints around off-leash dogs and aggressive behavior and challenges and community conflict around dogs. So we're disappointed that we don't have very many dog licenses that have been issued, because I'm pretty sure that there's probably on average 2 to 3 dogs per household in this community, if you were to average it out. But what we are doing is going to step up our enforcement education campaign, and Ms. Regenweiter is working on a project with our communications coordinator to really enhance the education, be out in the community. That will include attending the Emergency Preparedness Day on how can you prepare your pet for emergency situations, attending at the farmers market, doing some neighborhood engagement, and we're going to see that start to roll out in April. And it is kind of a long-term project. She'll tick away at it as she can, and we're hoping that that will encourage residents to keep their dog on leash, pick up after the dog, and get a dog tag. We actually had a dog here this morning that had no dog tag, and nobody knew whose owner it was. So if you get your dog tag, we can get your dog home. We don't charge you. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge, and we're definitely feeling the crunch of the interactions that are happening out there, which is unfortunate. Not everybody loves dogs. And then the other thing I wanted to just flag really is around ticketing. You know, certainly for 2021 and 2022, due to staffing shortages, we were not very active in the enforcement side in terms of ticketing. It did become a little bit unwieldy out there in some neighborhoods and some parts of the community where we were having complaints and issues around long-term parking. And when I say long-term, about 3-4 weeks, people just leaving their vehicles there while they go on holiday or whatever. That was stepped up. We spent pretty much the tail end of the second quarter really getting out there and educating, putting flyers on people's cars, reminding them of the rules. And then once the winter parking regulations hit in November 15th, we started to step up a little bit more. Still working on the education component and warnings, but if we had people who were just consistently in place, we would ticket. One of the areas that I will flag is a real issue is Arbutus Crabapple. With the building of the mountainside, the contractors are parking there all day. We have had 2 of the multifamily developments come and ask us for parking passes because their parking doesn't facilitate the number of vehicles that are there, and they want special parking passes so they can park on the street whenever they want and hand out to people.
The workers or the residents who are talking about?
The residents, one strata and the residents.
Because workers are taking their parking or?
No, because they've got too many vehicles for the number of stalls on their property, and both of these developments have the number of parking available as per the zoning. But they've got more vehicles than they have parking stalls, even though they have the required number. And so they're asking for on-street parking passes. I think we're going to see the same thing with Mountainside. The tandem garage and the short driveways is going to cause those residents to park on the street. That causes a problem for operations in the winter particularly. So I think we're going to see some challenges in that neighborhood, and bylaws spending a lot of time talking to people, reminding them that they can't park there all day or for 3 days in a row. So
We're not offering passes, are we?
no, we are not.
Good, thank you.
No, we can't. There's only really on Arbutus, there's probably only really 10 spaces. But what happens is with people parking there all day, the businesses in that area are impacted. There's no place for people if you're going to get your hair cut or pop into the Mount Currie Coffee Company or wherever you're going to go to do some work, the accounting company, there's no place to park. The parking lots that are affiliated with those developments are overflowing. And there was that lot that was open between Gateway and Orion that was available, but when the property owners, rightfully so, closed that space to public use, it is completely impacted that area. So we've had some definite challenges in that area, and tickets are being issued. We don't really know how else to manage it.
I know this isn't the topic of the conversation. I just wanted to clarify that I think I heard you say that the developments did meet the zoning for parking. There were no variances applied to that.
Not for the 2 buildings that were that have come and asked us for passes.
Right.
And so Radius has the amount of parking that is required. They've asked for passes. Orion has the amount of parking required. They have not asked for passes. Gateway has the required parking, the amount of parking required. They've asked for passes. And my guess is we will get Mountainside asking for them as well.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I struggle with the mountain. I mean, yeah, like you said, it's a bigger conversation.
Yeah, it is.
but you know, the fact that people don't use the garages for garages, and I mean, that's
Yeah.
Like, how do we?
Yeah.
Bigger conversation.
Yeah.
Right, carry on.
Thanks. Sure.
And then just in terms of customer service requests, we're kind of on par with what we did the previous year. We did see over 2019 and 2021 or 2020 and 2021, a few more, like a higher number, because we did field a lot of requests around COVID safety and the health measures and that kind of thing. So it kind of is balanced out, I would say. So that is our update. I'm happy to take any questions.
I'm really pleased to see the vandalism reports is down to 0 for the last while. That's a real nice thing to see, because I know it's to go, it was huge, the amount of problems with that.
Yeah, we had a little spate of activity, shall we say.
Compliments to the community for that. That's nice to see that's reduced. Thank you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Do you get a lot of film permit applications?
We field a lot of interest. We are a popular place to come. We are outside the Lower Mainland tax deduction. They can get a tax rebate if you are within a certain space within the Lower Mainland. We're just outside that. But having said that, we do get a lot of inquiries. There are a couple of production companies that have done a lot of work up here. And so commercials, car commercials in particular, we might all remember the Lincoln commercial that was filmed. And we are a little bit on the radar for Hallmark movies now, which is nice. So when we do have a film permit application, I mean, we really do encourage them to stay locally, utilize the local businesses, and most of those production companies are very generous in their support of the local community and do reach out and help. And if they do impact any businesses, there is a per diem that they'll offer to those businesses. Yeah, thank you. So it is kind of fun sometimes. Sometimes it's a lot of work.
Lucrative too.
It can be. It's yeah, we're not dealing with major productions, but we have. I have had the thrill of selling snow and making money on selling snow many years ago. So you never know. You never know. They bought it.
Just a question, and I know this is probably a much bigger conversation as well, so it's more curiosity based, but the 5% cap.
Yes.
On rentals, what's the basis behind that?
Well, you may recall in 2018, when council was, you don't.
I don't. I want to.
Okay, sorry. But in 2018, we revisited the zoning bylaw, and there was a lot of work through 2017, 2018. The zoning bylaw was updated, and one of the conversations that took place was around the short-term vacation rentals, and in particular, we did a whole consultation process related to short-term vacation rentals and what does that look like and the impacts on the community. Council at the time was somewhat uncomfortable with opening up the floor to allowing short-term vacation rentals, an unlimited number because of the housing challenges that people were being faced with and the cost of the housing. A lot of people are taking their suites out of the rental market for varying reasons. Some have got teenage kids now and they don't want them in their house. They'd rather have them down in the suite. Others have parents who are coming to live with them. Or people have just decided that they just don't want to have it out, don't want to rent it anymore because of the experiences they've had with bad renters. So when council was looking at what it might look like in terms of business licenses, they wanted to address and make sure that a neighborhood wasn't overwhelmed. And so what they asked us to do is look at by neighborhood and create caps per neighborhood based on the number of houses there and established a 5% cap. So each neighborhood will have a bit of a different number. Aspen Fields, which is Alder, Willow, Aspen Boulevard, and Poplar. There's only 3 business licenses, I think, that are allocated for that, and they're in place. We did come to council and ask if there was an interest to maybe open up the cap, and that was just last year in response to someone who would like to see the cap increased. And council indicated that they weren't desirous of moving in that direction.
Okay, good. Thank you.
A little more context on it too, Councilor. There was, the idea was at the time, recognizing this is an industry now. It's not going to go away. It's a part of hospitality now. And that there was concern, especially when you look at our housing situation now, about keeping it in the inventory But the thought was if we say no completely, village doesn't allow for it, it just drives it underground.
Mhm.
And it would make it that much tougher for staff to monitor. Whereas if we offer a certain amount, it legitimizes it and allows for staff to say, okay, you want it, you're on the waiting list here, or yes, there's a space, this is what you have to do. So, and I think generally staff has felt that it has allowed them to sort of monitor and manage people better.
Yeah, so we do monitor and part of the process for getting a short-term vacation rental license is that you agree to a neighborhood agreement, which basically establishes that you understand the noise regulations, you understand the parking, you know.
Neighbor,
A good neighbor agreement and that you will, if you have a short term, put this information available so that we can avoid the party situation. They have to have a contact somebody who can be contacted at any time. And again, to avoid people from renting out their house and going away for 2 months and then having it being party central. So, you know, I think a lot of things have changed in the sharing economy because of COVID. And people are sort of more into it's a little less. I think at first it was quite overwhelming for a lot of communities because so many people said, we're going to make so much money putting our place on short-term vacation rental. But we do know there's some people who stepped away from it because it's a lot of work. You're washing sheets, you're cleaning the house, you're managing people coming and going, and it's not as lucrative if you're hiring cleaners and doing laundry and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So but yeah, we have a neighbor agreement, and we do monitor. It is challenging to establish, in some cases, people who the owner of the house is, because people don't use their real name, they don't give their address, they just show pictures and it's just the inside. So you've got to try to figure it out. Anyone that we're able to identify, we do contact them if they don't have a license and just say, hey, did you know you need one? And this is how you go about getting one, and try to work with them. We do ask them to take their ad down. It is a bit deceiving because if people do go on Airbnb and put in Pemberton, it shows that there's, can be up to 150 spaces, but what we've generally seen is it reflects all the way up to Darcy, all the way out the Meadows, all the way to Whistler, and in some cases Whistler properties. So the number of short-term vacation rentals in Pemberton are not as great as might seem once you start to really look at what they are.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that answer. Yeah.
Any questions? Actually, I don't know if it's a typo. I was curious in your chart. You said that there was no licenses issued for Sunstone. The cap has one, but there's none available.
Oh, that might have been
What page it is? That's page 19.
Page 19. That should be one. My apologies.
Motion received, please. Councilor Connor, second by Councilor Craddock. Any opposed? It carries. Resolutions, Ms. Fraser.
Me again. The outstanding resolutions is a report that council asked a number of years ago to receive, just to get an understanding of what resolutions have not been actioned over time or are in process of being actioned or have been delayed for whatever reason that might come up, which might be due to waiting another organization to work with another organization. So you'll note that a number of these, all of these resolutions at this point are carryover from the previous council. And we do provide a status update just to let council know where things are with some of these projects. A number of them are are underway, and you'll be seeing information about them coming up. And I'm happy to ask any questions or answer any questions you may have.
Any questions on outstanding resolutions? See, please. Nightingale, any opposed? It carries.
Thank you.
Fraser.
Good morning.
On 8.3 Development Services, fourth quarter report, Mr. McRae.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. So I'm here today to present the Development Services fourth quarter report. So I'll just quickly here, I'll try to be brief and quickly go over the report to protect everyone's time, but please ask questions on anything you'd like me to expand on. The format is, you'll see my report template is evolving a little bit. I'm just trying to give council a little bit better visibility in terms of the really good work that the team is doing. So on the building side, you'll see that we've kind of expanded the template to include active permits. So you can kind of see that the point there, I guess, is that just looking at permits received and permits issued doesn't really give you the best visibility on what's actually happening. Those active permits, our team can expect to be contacted by any one of those holders on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, typically for any active building permits. So there's a fair amount of activity, even though it doesn't look like it on the surface. Moving into the building statistics and the building numbers, I wouldn't worry about anything here. The key aspect of Pemberton when it comes to building permits is we're a very small community. So these volumes are always very lumpy. So if we have a large multifamily building coming through, you're going to see a sudden burst in permit volume. And likewise with a subdivision, if you have a new subdivision come through, suddenly there's a bunch more activity on the building permit front. And then if there's not any of those things subside quite a bit. We've processed various other little applications as well, which we've tried to add visibility to there as well. So request to view property files, boulevard maintenance permits, that sort of thing. Moving on to the planning side, trying to just give council a quick snapshot of what's active. We have 19 projects that we're currently processing. 8 of those are in progress, which I'm saying is village staff are actively working on. So, we have a deliverable to provide to the project, whereas waiting would be projects where we're waiting on something from the applicant or an external party to deliver. Quick note on those numbers, it's interesting how different some of those projects can be. For example, like an OCP and zoning amendment could be something that affects only one lot or something that has hundreds of units potentially coming downstream. So as much as that's giving you some insight into how much work there is, it still can mask a really wide variability in different project size. So the department received no new development applications in the fourth quarter 2022. So that's saying complete applications with everything required to enter the process. Added a new section here, potential to appear next quarter. So just trying to give council a heads up on what you might expect to see in the next few months. There's some major disclaimers there that we find it very difficult to really know exactly what's coming down the pipe, more than even a few weeks ahead at times. So this is take that with a grain of salt, but this is, pretty high likelihood you'll see these ones coming down, and maybe something else will sneak in depending on deliverables and things that developers are working on. One that isn't there that I'm kind of thinking about, it may come sooner than later, is the Harrow Road project housing agreement.
What about I'm sorry if I may, what about the French school?
Yeah, the French school, the zoning amendment is adopted. We've been in contact with that applicant as they work through concerns with MOTI, or I shouldn't say concerns, but process with MOTI, as well as their design efforts. And as they get into more detailed design, they have a bunch of work to do with the school board as well. So we hear from them sporadically, but it's definitely moving. Yeah.
Any chance it might start this year, or is that kind of out there to guess at?
I don't have a good idea of that. There's a small chance, I would say, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if it takes longer.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we've added a new section here just about sort of a wider lens on the department activities. So talking about, as you've heard, we've in the fourth quarter, we really started to nail down our service mandates. So that's something I'm really excited about. It just helps us frame our work better and talk about what we're trying to do and what we're trying to deliver. Without these, I found that really the metrics of success are faster, better, stronger all the time. which it can blur the debate about whether or not you're achieving what the community expectations are. So we do have, these are always going to be open to change. And we heard in the previous committee of the whole that there's maybe some changes to the language we should incorporate, which we will do. But overall, I'm really excited to have these service mandates to kind of hold up, and the whole team can, measure our success against them. So I'm going to probably move these to the front of the report and just have them there for the rest of time to remind us of where we're going here. The development services operational priorities. So this is an effort to sort of take the framework that council adopted and zoom it in for just a department level approach. So I kind of imagine this feeds into the council priorities. There's a little operational box for development services. And this is kind of like if you expanded that and looked deeper into it. So this was as of January 1st. So a few of these items have already been completed, which is great. We can move other items up. So you can it's a really helpful, in my mind, prioritization tool. So we can all be on the same page about what the department is working on now, what we kind of see as a next priority. And then the council can see all the other elements that we're kind of juggling and aware of that we need to work on, but haven't had the opportunity to get to yet. I tried to communicate as well at the very last row of the table that this list, the later list, goes on. It is quite long. It's kind of funny how that list can grow and grow and grow, which it's all got good things there, but whether or not the priorities there, essentially maybe in 2 years, you'll see things that are on that later list now start to bubble up as priorities change. So, and the last section is just a little bit wider lens again on sort of the things that the team is doing to try to improve our service delivery. So these are not as discrete, they're not single tasks or deliverables like in the previous table. They're more like overarching projects that have various pieces that we've sort of pulled together. So an example is moving to using contract building officials. That solved a huge problem we were feeling in 2022 when our previous much loved building official decided to move on. And that program using contractors has really helped us in terms of providing high quality service. So both of them are level 3 building officials that is more scalable to the village's needs. So they work anything from 2 to 30 hours a week, depending on how much work we have. Another thing we've really put some time into in 2022, and it will be ongoing most likely, was kind of a process audit. So looking at all of the things we do and really asking, does this benefit us still? Is this still worth doing, or could it be streamlined? So that's something I'm really excited to continue with, and revisiting those things on a regular basis. That's another thing that's can be challenging, is saying, okay, this is how we do it. Let's have a look again. And is it still meeting our needs, or can we change things? Inevitably, if we have a new team member, I'm sure that person will be the one to say, wait a second, what are you guys doing here? You could streamline this by removing that step entirely. So looking forward to that continuing. I'm happy to explain any of those in more detail if council would like. Last, I just wanted to touch on the community climate action plan. So trying to sort of track implementation off the side of a desk here. There's a small table in the quarterly report that provides the numbers as they stand, but really this is no one's full-time effort. We understand as council's priority, there's a lot of interest in climate action for sure, but we just don't have the time to dedicate to moving these initiatives forward. That said, there is some provincial support available that we are looking to put to work for us. So the team does intend to bring something to council in the first half of this year to have that discussion and see where priorities lay. One thing while we're on the topic, the community climate action plan has over 80 actions that are quite broad, and everything across those 6 big moves. But one big aspect that needs to be updated is the corporate emissions plan. So talking about the village's emissions, like from our operations, from our lawnmowers, from our trucks, those kind of things, and moving and trying to reduce those. So we don't have an up-to-date one there, and not that we necessarily need to spend a lot of effort on planning it. It's just how do we fit that into our other climate action, our community climate action plan actions. So more to come on that, and happy to discuss in more detail if council would like. So that concludes my report today. Are there any questions?
Jason, yes and no?
Through the chair, I just wanted to commend Mr. McCray for his creation of this new framework for reporting that connects back to council's priorities, as well as recognizes our goal to see continuous improvement in the way that we work and thinking more critically about our processes and workflow. And I think I just want to highlight that what you see here is much like what we'll see across the departments going forward when we do reporting on the current priorities. And so in Q1, either through presentation or reporting.
Great.
Scott?
Yeah, thanks very much. Occupancy permits.
Mhm.
There was, I can't find it right off the bat here, but I think there was 10 or 11 that are in line right now, but haven't been approved. What's the process of getting those finalized?
Yeah, that's a good question. Through the chair, there's checklists are available in the building department that would provide the detailed requirements, and one is maintained for each application. So it varies by building permit what is required to get it across the line. Oftentimes it's just a document, and some document is missing, or some deliverable that has been agreed to be delayed until prior to occupancy. That's really our last chance to collect everything we need before we close the file. So it can be so variable that I would hate to don't want to spend too long speculating on each particular one, but that information is kept track of.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Thanks for the report. I appreciate the effort to pull the layers back a bit and show the numbers and trying to rearrange it to make sense. Definitely lends well. More of a comment and it is also a question, but I think what I hear from the community and what I also heard when we spent our time together was around, and I just don't know how to word it, but really sustainable development and a consideration for the environment and the impacts to the existing structure. And how do we take that and weave it into the report so that there's an underlying recognition and respect for what the community is telling us around development? And I don't know the answer, but I do look for that a little bit, and maybe it's around, but I'll leave it with you to just think about, maybe it's around the mandate, in that the three numbered points there are very clear. But what is missing, I think, is a recognition of policy requirements that respect and pay attention to the environment around development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, through the chair, I think that's a great idea and something we can take away and continue to kind of optimize, to try to improve on, iterate on. I could see it, though. That's a great suggestion to start with, to try to just incorporate more of the language into the service mandates.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Move the report.
Mr. McCray,
Sorry.
Aspens, I think that's what it's called. I'm nowhere to be seen on here. That's the one across from the community center, right? Isn't that Aspens?
Aspect, yeah.
Aspect, sorry.
Yes.
Any movement there?
Yes, through the chair, that project is in building permit application. So that's one we've been anticipating would be issued any day. Well, not quite any day, but soon. But it has been slower than expected. There's a number of the conditions on the development permit that are still outstanding. Notably, a MOTI review, MOTI approval has not been provided yet. So we are that's definitely one that's waiting for more information.
Okay.
A good example of one, once it's released, though, we'll see a huge burst in permit.
That's why I was noticeably absent.
Yeah, if you look back at last quarter's report, it was hinting that it would come in the fourth quarter, but it didn't. So,
That's your name, yeah.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the site alteration permit process replacement. I'm just wondering what it's being replaced with.
Yeah, great question. Through the chair, the site alteration permit sort of regulatory framework is something that was established in the early 2000s. So it's quite dated since then. The community charter has been legislated, which gives municipalities much broader powers when it comes to the main topics that were meant to be regulated by the site alteration permit process. So that's really trees and like soil deposition. So we need to modernize our regulations to take advantage of those new powers that have been granted essentially, and streamline things. The site alteration permit process is quite clunky, we find. So exactly, it just needs an overhaul, and there's some opportunities there for sure for the municipality to take advantage of. So kind of expanding on that a little bit further, that's something we're trying to fit in right now. Really, the soil deposition bylaw and the tree protection bylaw are parts of that. So it's kind of like that overarching project, and then all the little bits we're trying to bring up to the surface to make it happen.
And will we have opportunity to have input on that as a
Certainly.
council? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. So when as those bylaws move forward, we'll frame it as, this is all part of the site alteration permit replacement process, or I need to work on the terminology there, but essentially, these bylaws are required to be adopted before we can repeal that bylaw, and this is the new process that will replace that process.
Great. One more thing. Thank you for the report. I just echoing what Councillor Helmer was saying. And I just hope that I remember in the strategic planning session that these reports do take a long time. It was acknowledged they take a long time, and I hope that this took you less time, because that was something that came out from Mr. McIntosh's commentary. So
Yeah,
I hope that it did. It's very detailed and informative. So
through the chair, it is. Yeah, we're starting to get to a more simple process where even some of these statistics, I think we can start to narrow down a little bit. The fourth quarter report does involve a little bit more annual numbers as well, which feeds into our annual reporting. So it's not terrible that way. But I think I'm starting to see it move in a direction that will make it much easier to update.
great. Thank you.
Again, motion to receive, please. Scott, second by Elmer, opposed, motion carries. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, 8.4 operations, Mr. Jima. Well, maybe just a note while Tom's sending in there too. Had a quick chat after our last budget session there when we were talking bottom up, and then we're talking about climate action, climate plan actions and all that sort of thing. It came to me after our meeting that, so I thought it was a little bit absent in our budget meeting. So taking that bottom up approach to the budget, I was just had an informal chat and follow up with the CAO, but as part of our next budget presentation, to look at what it looks like to have within the budget the resources to implement more of the climate action plan actions. So just so you know, there's a follow up. Mr. Chima.
Hi, good morning. Morning, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me today. I'm here to present my fourth quarter report of 2022, which covers the same period that the previous managers did, obviously October to December. Yeah, it's interesting looking back. It's not that long ago, but it does, when we're talking about the fall cleanup and the activities that we do during this quarter, it's always interesting how many things have happened and projects that we've been involved in. So as usual, the fourth quarter starts with us kind of preparing for winter, which is cleaning up park spaces, fall cleanup, blowing out irrigation lines, etc. And preparing for snow removal operations. In addition to those regular activities, there's a couple notable ones. We supported in the project site preparation for the daycare center expansion, and the unfortunate removal of the nature play center, but the nature playground. But we helped out on that. The operations department and the public works crew did a lot of work there, so I just wanted to recognize that. Also, there was a couple major water main breaks that we repaired in the fourth quarter. It's always difficult, challenging late in the year to get materials and paving done, but the crew responded very swiftly and effectively, repaired both of those without causing too much of major disruption. I know the one on Joseph Depart Lane caused an outage for the downtown core for several hours, but considering the magnitude of those breaks, I think that the crew did a very good job at restoring service very quickly. Also just wanted to note, I think everyone was aware of the big planned power outage that happened in the fourth quarter, and the operations crew responded to that very, very well as well, coming in on the Sunday to make sure that all of our infrastructure was operating properly. But it's made a lot easier with the addition of our generator at the well house, which we did last year. So yeah, just thought I'd throw that. Otherwise, winter started somewhat early this year with some major snowfalls, especially around the holiday period. So again, I just want to extend my personal gratitude, but also I think on behalf of the community, the gratitude of the snow clearing operations crew for working long hours during the holiday period. It seems like it always happens at Christmas that they don't really get much time off, but yeah, keeping the roads and sidewalks clear. So that was sort of the end of the fourth quarter. I do have, as usual, a list of sort of the regular operations. It's a la carte. You can choose to ask me about any of them. I won't go into them in too much detail here, but the standard sort of regular operations of our lift stations, wastewater treatment plant, water treatment plant. We did hire a new GIS technician, which we're very excited about. We're starting to see some definitely positive improvements to our systems there. Mentioned the snow and ice removal, water main breaks. Still ongoing work on our supervisory control and data acquisition program. That's what we call SCADA. That's the control system for all of our operations. Had some major work on our pump house chlorine injection skid overhaul. I don't need to, I'm sure you don't need to hear too much detail on this, but one thing that I did want to know, which is for previous council members, probably have seen this been talked about quite a bit, is our wastewater treatment plant basin cleaning. We it was about 3 years ago, we identified that this was an unsafe work practice to clean the basins. So I'm very proud to say that we've now completed the procedure around cleaning those basins, and it's been approved by WorkSafe BC, and we completed the cleaning of the first basin in the fourth quarter. So that's one that since I've worked here, we've not been able to do. So very happy to be able to do that. And in parks, I kind of separate out the parks and public works. Again, standard operations, cleanup of gardens, Christmas light installation. We didn't go as crazy this year, mainly because of staffing and budget constraints, but we do have some plans for next year to include some extra installations on the light posts and make it a little bit more exciting. Also, just thought I'd note that we did some clearing of trees at 1 Mile Lake Nature Center. There's just a lot of these nuisance cottonwoods that have been sprouting up and kind of overgrowing around the building and causing some maintenance issues for the building. So we did a nice cleanup out there. And my thought was actually to educate the Nature Center around the cottonwoods, which caused them a lot of problems, and they could potentially use that as an education piece with the children, show them which ones are cottonwoods and pull them out when they're this big, rather than, because they grow fast and they can cause quite a bit of problems. So put the little hands to work. I've got a couple photos on here. I think pictures always say it better than words, so you can look at a couple of the activities that I mentioned there. And then lastly, in my report, I included the status update on some of the major projects, similar to Mr. McCrae's report, with just, where we're at. I'm very proud to say that we've completed that basin cleaning. I mean, we've done one basin, we still have to do the next, but that should become a regular operational task now. So no longer a major project. Also, Permanent Farm Road East washout. I like to say my daughter was born 2 weeks after that washout happened, and she's turning 3 next week. So I'm very happy to say that we also completed the majority of the work there. after quite a long delay due to some issues with BC Hydro and the ducting work that needed to be done. But yeah, we got it done before she turned 3, so. It's good. Several in progress projects. I'll start with Lot 13 multimodal transportation hub. I think council's aware that we've got the grant for that project, and there's the sign there now. There's a lot of work going on in the background, obviously no physical work that can be seen on site, but survey, engineering, environmental, geotechnical investigations. We're actually, I heard a question about the French school came up, and we're actually in conversations with them around utilizing part of the lot and just figuring out access and how we can optimize that site for the gardens and the parking lot, because we also have plans for future community gardens on that site. So how we can kind of tie those two things together. And obviously, while they're designing, it's an opportunity to optimize those designs. Amenity building and parking lot at Dundalk Park. This one's climbing up to become a more top priority. We're hoping to get going on this now. We're working with consultants on the project management piece there to help get the RFP out. I've targeted this month to get an RFP out. Might be a bit ambitious, but essentially they've been working on the same consultants have been working on the daycare, and there's been a lot of extra work on that. That's so we haven't shifted their focus to this one yet, but we can soon. Walnut lift station upgrade. We've just received the design for that sanitary lift station upgrade, and we'll be discussing that with nearby developments that are in the planning process, and possibly them contributing to that, because it's all part and parcel. Signal Hill sidewalk, we've commenced a redesign. We've discussed with the school district around putting part of that sidewalk on the school district property, and we've only discussed it operationally, but their operations manager has indicated it's likely something that the school board would support, given that it aligns with their initiatives for safe access to schools and safe pedestrian ways. So that would be a huge win for us to be able to safely have the sidewalk not so close to the road, and also it alleviates several design constraints that we've been facing. So I think I discussed that in the fourth quarter or the third quarter. Permanent Farm Road East upgrade. There's been extensive work done on this, and actually just before this meeting I had a design meeting where we're close to final design on that. So getting very excited about proceeding with this. We are awaiting grant funding decision on the proposed trail, but the developer will also be doing the road. So we're hoping that we can get that grant and align the project to be when they're doing the road works. If not, we'll have them do the base works for the trail and postpone the major works of the trail for when we get the grant. But we are very hopeful to get that grant sooner rather than later. Wastewater treatment plant outfall mitigation measures. This is sort of another behind the scenes one, but we're just trying to stay on top of the outfall issues. I think I've explained this to council in the past, but around the sedimentation that's blocking the outfall periodically. So just working on making some operational changes to keep that flushing and moving so that it doesn't have the same issues going forward. Last one in progress. Oh, sorry, 2 more EV chargers. We're working right now with BC Hydro on the EV chargers out on Astor Street. There are several challenges that we've seen around the hydro service and capacity on that power supply, but we're working through that, and we've already purchased the charging units. They're in storage now, so we're ready to go forward once we have that hydro connection, and that should be completed this spring. It must be completed this spring, actually, for the grant. Fernwood Water Main, I thought about putting this one on hold just because we haven't really made progress on it, just given the other projects that the team's been focusing on, but this one still does need to get done. We might we might do it in phases so that we just do the pressure reducing valve, that's the PRV, and worry about the water main at a later date. A couple others awaiting. We do have EV chargers destined for the Dundalk Park there. We're going to do that in conjunction with the amenity building. That's through the Sea to Sky electric vehicle charging network that we partnered with Squamish and Whistler. Water treatment investigations, we're awaiting word on a grant application there as well for a new water treatment plant that would add filtration primarily for manganese and iron, which would also potentially open up possibilities for another source. 1 Mile Lake Trail widening, we have our environmental approvals submitted. This has been over a year, but they do say that it takes 12 to 18 months. So we're hoping to have word on that this year and possibly start doing some work there. And our speed readers, we have them ordered. They were said to be delivered in January, although I haven't received them yet. But as soon as we get them, they're going to go up. Otherwise, the regular sections of the report, we don't have any particular legal or budget or interdepartmental impacts. So that concludes my report.
Mr. Chima.
Happy to answer questions a la carte. You know that's sewage, right?
This is just a note, not a question, Mr. Seema. I've noticed on Lupin Street.
Pardon me?
Lupin Street, just off the Harrow. Over the last 3 weeks, there's getting to be quite a dip just beside the first house on the left when you turn down the street. So I don't know if that's frost coming out, but it's getting to be quite a bump when you drive across. So I just thought I'd mention it because I know you can't be on every street all the time. But I didn't notice it there in the fall, but it's certainly showing up now. Thank you. Good report. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Any questions? You receive. Councilor Helmer, seconded by Councilor Paddock. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Chima. Thank you. On rec services, Ms. Burns. Good morning.
Morning, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me. Fourth quarter. So as council may be aware, we've spent the majority of the last 2.5 years in recovery mode. And I think fourth quarter started to show that we are now moving towards new normal for operations. So we're pretty pleased with 678 unique registrations for children's programs just for fourth quarter. That's quite significant. As you can imagine, that means there's more kids after school than normal, as well as more kids all day long, because we also added a parent and tot program that we partnered with Sea to Sky Community Services to operate, as well as we started trying to offer early years programs as well in fourth quarter. So we're pretty excited about that. Adult fitness programs showed continual growth in the fourth quarter as well. So we're pretty pleased with that. I do not think we canceled anything in the fall, which, well, that's not necessarily heard of. It's regular to cancel some programming, especially when it comes to adults. Seniors programming, we're really pleased with how we've charged forward. Fourth quarter, we partnered with Better at Homes in creating the Movement Matters, as well as the Social Matters programming. That one is full every Monday, and we're really pleased with the service that we're offering for the seniors who have some aging needs in the community. So we're actually getting, I would say 25% of the registrants are actually coming up from Whistler to participate in those programs because Whistler doesn't have them. So that's pretty exciting that we're servicing more than, well, we're servicing our community as well as surrounding. So that's pretty exciting. And we anticipate some growth there for Whistler as well as for ourselves. Youth programming, we're excited to say that numbers are on par with fourth quarter the year before, and that's kind of on par with pre-COVID to a certain extent. But as some of you may be aware, youth are probably the most fickle demographic to program for. It's always challenging because it always changes. You have a few years where it's like if you create the plan and you let them know, they all come and they sign up and they do all of these other things. And then you have a few years where you do it and nobody comes, and then you have a few years where you do it and you have no idea, and then you're like over capacity. So I'm happy to say that we're starting to see youth come back, not in hordes, but they're coming back and they're using the space and they're hanging out, and staff are busy. We did modify hours in the fall so that we're only programming Thursday, Friday, and Saturday in the rec for youth. But we extended our Thursday hours, and that was based on feedback from the youth, because we were only open for, I think, 3 hours on Wednesdays and 3 on Thursdays. So this way it allows us to open longer on Thursdays. And we do still have a block for some physical programming on Wednesdays, which is hit or miss depending on the season right now. It's a miss. We definitely welcome back adult drop-in sports in fourth quarter. I think we were pretty excited to get basketball and soccer back on the roster through rentals of PSS. So we're excited to be back there. I think fitness center use is, well, it's up significantly. So 8,496 unique visits to the fitness center in the fourth quarter. And that's up 2,029 from fall of 2021. So in fall of 2021, we were pretty pleased with how busy we were at that point in time. And I think in fall of 2021, we were still doing bookable time slots. So now it's just open. So it's quite busy, which is great. You can see that pass sales have consistently increased across the board on all passes. That's exciting, which also tells you why we're so busy. Facility use hours in the fall, 2,821.25 hours of use in the facility. And I think it's worth noting that that doesn't include the fact that we have 2 rooms that are booked Monday through Friday from 8 until 3. Well, one's booked 24/7 and one's booked 8 to 3 just for SD93 to utilize during school hours. So that doesn't include that space. So that's pretty exciting from our perspective. We're at the point now where the fall really required a lot of juggling of different demographics and different demands on the facility. So I think we're getting to a much more stable system, but we were still recovering, even though very busy. Outdoor facilities, obviously, fourth quarter is much quieter. It pretty much shuts down. We start fall closures of fields and outdoor spaces and sometime after Thanksgiving through until Remembrance Day. So use of the parks and fields kind of stops around Thanksgiving weekend. I think we had a little bit of additional use just because we had such a nice fall right until we didn't. So that's pretty exciting to see the use there. Facility maintenance was busy with ongoing preventative maintenance of the facility for the most part. I think there were a couple of projects ongoing. One that we started in 2021-ish is just increasing accessibility in the facility. So on top of completing the first phase for the library, we also added accessible access to the fitness center itself. So that just increases our accessibility in that space. And we plan to do more of that around the building as well. Recreation projects, as everyone is aware, the basketball court, we had really hoped the backboards were going to go on in fourth quarter. However, we had a hiccup with the manufacturer. However, right now we're just working towards getting those up now before the 1st of March. Because it looks as if we could actually go shovel it and they could use it. So we are just coordinating with operations because the facility maintenance coordinator needs assistance in order to do that project. So we're just trying to see where we can fit it in. And then you'll see that project completed probably second quarter or third quarter with the surface being added to that space. Other than that, I am open for any questions that you may have.
Ms. Burns.
Thank you.
I had a question just about the basketball court. Is it, and it was based on a conversation I had with someone in the community. I just want a clarification. Is it the court, do you have to book the court if you want to use it? Or is it, does school have priority over it, or how does that work?
Okay, through the chair, thank you for that question. If you would like exclusive use of the space, then we have a booking process that we will go through with you. So exclusive use would mean I'm going to run a basketball tournament and it's going to be from 5 p.m. until 10 p.m. Friday night and all day Saturday. So then we would book the space on your behalf, and that would allow you the ability to turn anyone who wanted to show up and use it away. Hours of operation are posted, and basically it's not accessible by public during school operating hours. So basically 3 p.m. on Monday through Friday, and Saturdays and Sundays, it'll be open to the public to use as they see fit. So public use in spaces is public use, right? So they can come and go as they please, but exclusive use of the space is when you would book it. And that's our facility booking coordinator, Cheryl Southall. So there is information on the signage that was posted there.
So if our university grads are back in the summer and they're playing hoops at noon on a school day,
That'll be fine in July and August.
but not June, okay.
Yeah, not until I think June 28th. The school will police it. Yes, they will police it because it's school grounds, and
Yeah.
it's not called stranger danger anymore, but pretty much. So, and they have been using that space during school hours already. So it's been nice to see a few classes out there.
Ms. Burns, is it going to lock up at night, or how does it get shut down?
At this stage in the game, it'll be accessible until we have some potential behavioral issues that mean we need to lock and unlock. So at this point in time, there's no.
See if it's an issue first.
We don't anticipate it being an issue. It's like, you don't have, you don't lock up the skate park. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's exactly.
So,
The nice thing about this location is it's not right on somebody's.
yeah, exactly. And it's also quite invisible. So it's not something where I would foresee, it's not something that we foresee any issues with. And that is something that we did discuss with the school district before in the whole process of determining location and them being happy with it. So yeah, we'll be working with them closely, obviously, if they run into any issues with objects on the court on a Tuesday morning or a Monday morning, then they will be getting the phone call.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Thanks, Kelly.
Excuse me, my question is, Bobby. I'm trying to put this in a nice way. I didn't know that we were gonna have the school having full access to it till 3 o'clock every day during the week of school time. And that's gonna reduce the public's use of it a huge amount, especially for the fact that there are gonna be some pickleball courts put in. I don't recall that ever coming to us prior to us putting that on site, so I'm a little taken aback by that. That's a lot of time frame that the community does not have use of that site.
Chair, thank you for that feedback. I do believe it was discussed. It's a school district gave us the land to put that amenity on it, and it is standard protocol on school property. If you're going to be putting a public amenity on school property, then you need to adhere to the school operating hours of use. It's very similar. Whistler has multiple fields that they rent for public use at Whistler Secondary School, at both elementary schools as well, but none of those fields are accessible during school hours. It is something that I'm sure that we can work with the school with to a certain extent, should it become an issue in high demand during school hours. Ideally, July and August are primary uses for amenities like that. So there will be no restrictions once school is out until school goes back in. And it is weather dependent activities and spaces like that as well. I apologize if you do not recall hearing that.
Yeah, I guess I must have missed that through the conversation.
It would have potentially been an easy miss for sure.
So then just moving forward with that, because pickleball is becoming very prominent in the community, mostly used by seniors. When the second coat of asphalt gets put down, will courts be put on it?
The current plan for the surface is that it has the basketball court lines, as well as I do believe we have room for 3 pickleball court lines as well. And we're just in the process of, well, actually, we haven't even started, but what we would do is they would be defined by color on the court. So the basketball court would be the main color, and then pickleball courts would blend in, but still be visible as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just speaking up for seniors that have found an outdoor exercise, and it's getting huge. Like
Exactly.
the timeframes we have now are overbooked
Exactly.
in some cases.
Yes.
Not all.
And that, I do believe, I mean, Tom and I talked about this a couple of years ago, but they had been waiting on line paint for the tennis courts. And there has been discussions about ensuring that pickleball courts are also added to the tennis courts when that product becomes available. So I'm happy to discuss with operations if there's a time frame for that moving forward as well.
Really much appreciated. Thanks very much for that.
No problem.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. It was definitely discussed when we talked about the location in Signal Hill. When we looked at all the different locations that we wouldn't be able to use it during the day, just.
Old minds forget quick.
That's okay. I'm not pointing it out for that reason. I'm just saying the school, it's not new from the school district.
No, yeah, that's right. Yeah, correct.
And yeah, I'm glad to hear about the tennis courts because those are very underutilized. There's a lot of excitement around the basketball court and so I think there's going to be a lot of use. So yeah, if we're looking at pickleball options, there's great, but let's make sure the tennis courts are available because I think there's going to be a lot of use. And with that in mind, with the regional discussion in mind, I would wonder if we do have the ability, I feel like what the school district definitely wants to avoid, you know, the stranger things or whatever you call it, and you know, a lot of noise and activity during school hours, that makes sense. I wonder if there was a controlled program during school, whether they would be amenable to that. You know what I mean? Like if it was like a mid-morning pickleball or something like that, as long as it's not folks showing up and almost said ghetto blast side or whatever. So music playing.
Now, they're smaller now. To answer that, Mayor Richmond, the school is always open to additional programming for students. So should there be a seniors group interested in doing pickleball during school hours, if they were to donate some time to classes to teach them to play, there is always room.
See this back.
Yes.
Perfect.
That would certainly be available, and I know pickleball is a little noisy, so it may not be the best thing to have during rural time. So we'll work with that, and I'm sure you will start thinking with that. Yeah, thank you.
That's Nightingale.
I was just gonna, thank you. I was just gonna say that I think based on the summers that we've had in the last bit, the heat of the summer, July and August. I mean, I just take the bike park as an example. No one's there during the day because it's too hot. And the tarmac of a basketball court, maybe you would be out there, but a lot of people. They'll be out there in the cooler hours and the older folks it'll be too hot. So if there are opportunities in the cooler months, I think it's a wonderful idea.
Good. Any other questions on the rec service quarterly report? None motion received, please. However, second by Robinson, discussion. Opposed, guys, thank you, friends.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Takes us to our last quarterly report. Keith Adams for Pemberton Fire Rescue. Morning. Morning.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Here to present the board quarterly reports for Pemberton Fire. I'll kind of go through everything here. In our fourth quarter, we saw 93 volume of 93 callouts, which seems for some reason seemed to be a popular number last year in 2018 or 93 as well. I'll commend our members with this. It actually seemed like a very slow quarter, and I think that's it's judging how it's the same as last year. It's just that we're coming into our own our abilities, and adaptability is definitely up to par where we can have an average call volume and feel that it's very slow. We saw through the year, we actually saw a reduction in burn complaints and illegal burns from previous years. And that I would say that's a direct result of our public education that we have out in public quite a bit more. The Fire Smart teams out weekly, and just a lot more information out in the public to give that information out around those pile burnings and field burnings and whatnot. So that's great to see that work actually in our numbers. Our total calls for the year was 355, which is down, and I think that kind of will correlate with those burn complaints. We're finishing off the year with actually our largest number of members over the last 5 years, which is also really good to keep those numbers up. Every time we have to train a person, that training costs a fair bit of money to bring them up to the standards that we have to provide for the public. We continue to improve with that too in most aspects of our response. So a number of responses, members responding to each call, which those minimum requirements are set by NFPA standards. So it's always obviously a goal for us to reach those standards. And yeah, it's continuing to improve. And I think obviously with more members, more availability, we will continue to see that improve as well. We're pretty much at that max number of members that we can see at this current hall, and actually what our apparatus would be able to carry to. Most typically with all fire departments throughout North America, the highest percentage of call volume comes through medical aid, which is typically what we see each quarter as well. And that is the normal throughout North America. And with that as well, it's average what we are seeing here percentage wise for alarms and motor vehicle accidents, and then all related fires as well. That's year to date. Percentages for incident areas. It varies year to year, but they're typically really close percentage wise throughout Leawatt, VOP, and then the regional district, if we include our fire district in that as well. They hover right around that 30 to 35% each one. So it's there's no outstanding each year to year. If one is always larger than the other, it seems to just kind of bounce around that 35% for each year. Membership, like I said, including the full-time staff is 39, and then 40 if we include our admin. So that is including our admin, deputy chief and our captain role. And then we do have 2-term fire smart staff that work out of the hall as well. In this quarter, we saw Captain Adam Elphus transition into that deputy chief role. After I took on the chief role, that happened October 17th. And then after that, we were successful in hiring Josh Livermore to the captain role as well. So we, as of January 16th, we actually started operating at full staff, which is good. We have been down that whole year as we're transitioning, and everyone's transitioning very well into their positions. It's great. We're starting to come into our own and roll with it. Capital projects. We completed our structural protection unit capital project this year. All the funds from that was actually created from deployments through BCWS to the Lytton Fire Complex. And then it was helped with a Whistler Blackcomb Foundation grant to top that off. And so that saw us with our one-ton pickup to tow the SPU trailer, the structural protection unit trailer. That structural protection unit trailer, for those that don't know, holds sprinklers and pumps and hoses and whatnot to protect structures in the event of a wildland interface. So that trailer can protect up to, depending on size of homes, of course, and distance between homes, but can protect up to 100 homes. It's designed for 50 to 100 homes. And then, so we got the 1-ton to tow that, 24 sets of 2-piece wildland gear, and what will be a tank and pump that will go into the back of the 1-ton truck. That's ordered. We held off on ordering that because of all the rises in prices. That quote dramatically went up this season, so we waited and we had to adjust the original design for that to fit within the budget. The Fire Smart team's been busy as well. We had completion of the treatment, which would be behind us here on the hill on the opposite side of Pemberton Creek. That treatment is taking away ladder fuels, dead brush, and anything like that to help that area be more protected in the event of a wildfire. So any ground fire, anything like that, it's not going to spread as well. That was also a grant, CRI 231. And then so in the late fall, there was some delays with that because of the temperatures. And so you would have seen some burning happening in the late fall there. And that was just the completion of that treatment. The Fire Smart team also brought in their second officially recognized Fire Smart Canada neighborhood, Tayetta. So they have Tayetta and the Bluffs as official recognized Fire Smart Canada neighborhoods. And they're going to continue, they have plans to continue with that this coming year and bring in Creekside and Mountain Trails into that as well. So hopefully we'll see 4 by the time this grant is completed. So they're the 2022 Fire Smart grant. They also held an annual Chipper Day, October 15th. And that is just everyone we're bringing in their yard waste. So we're trying to reduce that backyard burning as much as possible. And they actually brought in over 2,000 pounds of combustible debris with that day, which is exciting to see, something that we will be working on to continue and just to reduce that backyard burning. And then they also completed just under 128 hours of mitigation work through any of the critical infrastructures throughout the village. We also collaborated with BL Blackwell for the new community wildfire resiliency plan, which you'll see later at the committee of the whole. And that concludes my fourth quarter report. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions? No questions. Motion received. Councilor Helmer, seconded by Councilor Ramsden. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you. We did.
Is everybody good to keep pushing through here? Okay, let's reset the clock. Ooh.
Then is the
Number 10, I only have Peevis to report on. Everything else, I think we've been up to date in terms of letting you know my activities, and I'll leave that for Councilor Ramsden. So no mayor's report. Councilor reports.
Nothing today.
The scramble.
I'm just gonna.
Go ahead. Take the heat off.
Give me a moment. I met with Joan and Anna of the Pemberton Arts Council to just start discussion about or to let them know that I would be on the committee for the Arts Council. They were really excited about that, and I'll be attending the first board meeting next week. They have lots of fantastic ideas and they're looking for support.
And money, probably.
Fortunately, they go together. That's it.
Awesome. Anything else?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Anyway.
Yes, so for Pemberton Valley and Utility Services, which was last week, we had several delegations coming in to report on long-term funding. So we had the Pemberton District Search and Rescue come in. We had the District Museum come in, library, as well as the PDTA. We also, the next big item was that we were looking at the consideration of the budget for PBIS. I'm just pulling up my notes here. So there are several items that we felt comfortable passing as of now, and then several that are coming back. So for search and rescue's budget was approved. In terms of the refuse station, we're holding off until March when we come back. When we see there's a few items that are still they're still waiting on information to come in. So refuge station, we're holding back. Museum, we approved no. Oh no, sorry, never mind. That is going back until they're coming back in March with that. Library will also be coming back in March. Cemetery, we are still waiting on some information in their budget request. And then the PBTS was also approved, and PETA fund, that is also coming back in March. Nice, yeah.
So yeah, as Councilor Ramsden said, there were a couple that we felt comfortable were not going to move. They were not going to change the big numbers of the overall budgets coming out of PBIS. Like Pemberton Radio, like there was a few that were just sort of flat or no brainers. A few of them that we wanted to come back because they either have increases or more information to come. And the increases, the museum asked for a fairly high percentage increase, and so there's discussion around that. They've got some great projects going, so we didn't approve, but we said, let's put in an increase in the budget to see what that looks like in the next iteration. And if there are any that represent some largest increases, then we'll look at that in the context of the whole budget and where all the numbers shake out in terms of taxation implications. Yeah, I think that's basically it. All right, moving along then. Correspondence for action. First up, SLRD. This is a request to increase the annual requisition to Cumberland Valley Recreation Trail Service. So they haven't seen an increase in a number of years. And I think we were looking at 20, increase to 25,000 potentially for their budget. If there's any questions, if somebody wants to make that motion.
Just a question. I know from previous areas, it can be raised up to 25% every number of years. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to use the full amount, does it?
No, as you know, so requisition, so with these budgets, the way that works through the regional district is we have requisition ceilings in terms of how much we can fund a service amount, and you're allowed to increase it a certain amount every year. The market allows you some increases, but there's a ceiling on it. And if you want to go beyond that ceiling to increase the requisition, you have to go back to the province. So that's what this is about. The requisition creates space, but isn't necessarily the budget that's applied. So this year we're looking at $25,000 for Cumberland Valley Trail Services, increasing their budget or increasing their requisition to allow for more space.
And I just wanted to explain that to the new members.
Does that make sense?
Some people might look at it and say, oh, gee, 25% increase, that's why they need that much. Or is it just a ceiling?
Yeah, same with the Councillor Ramsden referencing the EIF. You know, we looked at that and gone, okay, right now we're able to accommodate all the requests that have come in for arts and culture, for economic development. Do we want to look at increasing the requisition? So in years ahead, if there is a need, we have the space to grow. So it's got.
Give an example of something that they would apply that money to, just for me.
It's anything in their budget. So every one of these budgets has a ceiling on the requisition in terms of how much we can, budget we can provide them with.
Right.
So, for Cumberland Trails Service, for instance, most of their money is all operational and maintenance, and they have a part-time executive director now up with operations. They did not, I think there was zero increase in their budget for actual trail building or projects would sort of come after or.
So it's primarily operations.
So it's primarily operation, but every one of the budgets that we look at PVAS has a requisition and therefore a ceiling as to how much, and again, if you want to increase that by any substantive amount besides what's allowed, then you have to go back to the province. Everybody good? Okay, we're on to, so did we move that?
Yes, we need, no, you need.
Okay, I need a motion to increase the annual requisition. 4.1A, Councillor Helmer, seconded by Councillor Craddock. Any opposed? Motion carries, and that covers both. And that's
Yes.
12.1B. I believe Ms. Fraser has a little information for us before we get into this.
So I received a correspondence from the regional district yesterday indicating that for the invasive species management, they need to get inspector approval after the consents from all the participating areas are received. With the regional invasive species management, this requires approval or consent from not only the 4 area directors, but electoral areas, but also the 4 member municipalities. So because there may be delay in getting those consents, they are the bylaw then needs to be sent to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs after all the consent's been received. So the challenge that they have is you may not meet the timelines for this year. So what they're asking is we provide our consent if council's agreeable, but
this will result in the maximum increase being in play for, will go into play in 2024, not 2023. So basically what you're doing is providing your consent for the bylaw now, but once it goes through its process, it won't come into effect until 2024. So the 2023 maximum requisition will remain at 75,000. And then in 2024, it will go up to 93,750. Of which the village contributes 5%. The village's contribution is only 5% of that amount. And that I think is about 15. Yeah, it's about a little under $15,000 increase. So the regional district just wanted me to make sure that council was aware that this isn't going to affect this year's budget. It will be in next year's. The maximum requisition will be effective next year.
Questions?
Do we still, I don't know why I go back in my mind to the last budget, don't we have invasive species amount in our budget besides this?
Yeah, through the mayor, there's two elements to this. What was agreed to was that the regional district member municipalities and electoral areas would contribute to a regional district pot that would go towards sea to sky invasive species and that program. But also sea to sky invasive species offers individual programming for the individual municipalities as well. And so we contribute $1,600 for, I believe that's what it is each year for our membership. And then we can access some of their programming or utilize some of the services that they provide to us, but that is separate than the regional program.
Thank you for that. I just want to clarify that because that puts us over $6,000 a year for invasive species. I don't know why that $1,600 or $1,800 we put in from the town isn't covered in this regional.
That was a conversation that took place at the time, and this is how it
just seems to be
landed.
You know, awfully expensive because although you see a few signs around town, I don't see many people pulling out the problem. So
they do work with, I mean, the challenge that we've had and seen in the village of Pemberton is a lot of the areas that they've identified with invasive species are private property. And council a number of years ago indicated that they weren't interested in allocating funding to support the weed pull and that work on private property, but that definitely willing to support it if it is on public property and municipal property, which our operations crew work with and do that work. So the $1,600 is our membership. And then if we wanted to have them come in and do extra work, we could have their teams come in at an extra cost, but that's separate from the regional project.
okay, I do see the schools at times have the kids go along the Iron Canal and with gloves on and pulling some.
And they work with sea to sky invasive species to do that work.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
And we said that, you know, we didn't want to pay to go on private property to do it, but we didn't want to have the education component for private property owners to be able to know how to deal with it on their own.
And sea to sky invasive species will work with Stewardship Pemberton and private property owners and they do education. They've been at the farmers market. So they do have a whole sort of education campaign, which our membership fees help support.
I just have a follow-up. What about the signs we see along the highway?
That's part of the regional program. That's
okay. That's on the region. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, personally, I'm happy. I think we get good value for the $5,400 or whatever it is we contribute combined there. I think the basic program is really important to our area. So personally, not just for any questions.
And not really just a comment, just similar. I think the concept behind the program is really important. The cost, although it isn't insignificant given our smaller budget, I think it's still really the risk benefit there really does provide value.
Question from you want to make the motion?
I will make the motion. As
presented by
Presented,
Councilor Helmer, seconded by Councilor Craddock. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. We have no correspondence for information. Decision on late business. Late business, we have none. Notice of motion. Question period. Regular council meeting is now open for questions from the public. Please be reminded that only questions directly related to items discussed during this meeting are permitted. If any members of the public attending via Zoom webinar wish to ask a question, please click on the raise hand feature in the webinar controls. This will notify staff that you'd like to ask a question. They will unmute your microphone when it's your turn to speak. And remember, this is a live webinar being recorded and it'll be available on the village's website following the meeting. Any questions?
Yeah. We have a question from David Song.
Yeah, thank you.
He's with the news, Peak News Magazine.
Yeah. The song ready when you are. Mr. Song, can you hear us?
Mute.
Not sure if you could hear us.
No,
but you're- oh,
My
there you go.
apologies, I forgot to unmute my mic.
All good.
All right, but yeah, thanks for everyone's time. My question has to do with the 5% cap on short-term vacation rentals in the village that was discussed earlier in this meeting. I was just wondering if someone could give me a little more context on when and how that measure was first implemented.
So yeah, like we said during the discussion earlier, it was, I'll get dates from Ms. Fraser, because she's got all that in her encyclopedia brain. But you know, the context of the conversation was, you know, a number of years ago with council was, okay, this is, you know, the sharing economy is an emerging industry that's not going away. How do we allow for it, recognizing that it's part of hospitality industry now? How do we allow for it so that it doesn't, or we minimize the impact on long-term rentals and the long-term rental inventory and cost? How do we, you know, similarly not drive it underground and keep it legitimate and do it in a way that's respectful of neighbors and quality of life? So through all those discussions, we came up with the fact that with the idea that a 5% cap allows for a certain amount of that activity while not having a huge impact on long-term rentals or on neighborhoods. So I don't know if that answers the question. That's how we came to that number in a way to manage it. And maybe Ms. Fraser, you can remind us when that happened.
Yeah, so the short-term vacation rental use was incorporated into the zoning bylaw in 2018 when the bylaw was under review. And upon adoption of the zoning bylaw, the business license bylaw was updated to incorporate the process by which short-term vacation rentals are administered through business licenses. And the cap is incorporated into that element into the business license bylaw. Which was adopted in fall 2018, I believe.
Is that the song? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah. So I'm getting that has not really changed in the last 4 years.
No, we look at it yearly as we, you know, quarterly even to see what the activity is and how things are going and check in with staff. And I think it's been felt by council that it's serving its purpose.
Yeah, makes sense.
If I can just add to that, we did have a brief conversation around this in the fall. And what council determined at that time was that we're heading into the OCP review, and this would be an element of conversation with the community through the OCP review to see how people are feeling about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And just a quick follow-up, Mrs. Fraser, were you the one who gave the development services? No, not the development services. The corporate and legislative services fourth quarter report that this was discussed in earlier today?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to double check the details. Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Staff on.
Staff on. Okay. Then I'm going to recess the regular meeting. Let's take 5 minutes. We'll go in the camera and get that done before lunch.
So we need a in-camera resolution.
Oh, yeah, sorry, motion to go in camera then. My bad. Councilor Helmer, second by Councilor Craddock. Opposed, motion carries.
Okay,